Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Ramanaya Namaskaram. Today I'm going to be talking about verse 7 of Aruṇācala Padigam. This is a prayer, but very non-dualistic prayer, and it's a prayer in which Bhagavan twice asks, "Who am I?" So it's such a beautiful combination of Bhagavan's jnana teachings and his bhakti teachings, both beautifully combined in this verse. I'll first read the verse and then I'll go through it sentence by sentence. Veli valiti ne mampala vuira virivuru buddha kangal veli oli unne andriindrenin veruyan arulan vimala veli adayulatu verera vilangin verena veli varun veli varain veli varara Aruṇācala avanchalayil virimala padaktine vete. This consists of 3 sentences. The first sentence takes up almost the first 2 lines, all of the first 2 lines. That is Veli vali tiene man palav uira virivuru Buddha bodhikangal veli oli unei andri indru enin veruyan ulan. What that means is, if the elements, that is the 5 elements, namely space, air, fire, water, and earth, and bodhikas, that is the elements called bhutas. The bodhikas means, in this context, it means everything that is composed of these elements. So if all the elements and everything that is composed of the elements, which expand or spread out or unfold as many living beings, are not other than you, the space of light. Who else am I? That is, Aruṇācala is the space of light. That means the light of pure awareness. That light of pure awareness is infinite. Since it is infinite, there cannot be anything other than it. So everything, all this multiplicity that we experience, this world made up of these 5 elements and all the living beings in this, none of these can be other than you. When such is the case, who else am I? That is the question. But obviously, it's a rhetorical question. But when he asks, "Who else am I?" that means, how can I be anything other than you? And then in the next sentence, he goes on to ask, Vimala. He addresses Aruṇācala as blemishless, oh blemishless one. Veli ada ulatu verera vilangin veru ena veli varuveina. That means, oh blemishless, if shining without another in the heart space. That implies if you shine without another in the heart space, who am I who come out as if another? That is, Aruṇācala he is ekam eva advitiyam, one only without a second. So there is no other than Aruṇācala, and he's ever shining in the heart at that space. That means the space of pure awareness. So when such is the case, who am I who have come out as if another? That is, the I that comes out as if another is ego, but this ego can never actually be anything other than Aruṇācala, because Aruṇācala alone is what actually exists. There's no second thing. That is, if Aruṇācala were finite, there could be something other than him. There could be a second thing. But since he's infinite, nothing can be other than him, because if there was anything other than him, his infinity would thereby be limited. In other words, he wouldn't be infinite. Since he is the one infinite whole, since he exists as, and since he therefore exists as one without another, one without a second, who is this I who comes out as if another? That is, clearly this I is not real. He says, veru means another. Enna can mean, it can mean as another, or it can mean like another. So in this case, it means like another, as if another. So he's not saying that he's actually anything other. It's just, ego is just seemingly other than the one thing that actually exists, the infinite space of pure awareness. It seems to be something other than that, but actually it's nothing other than that. So as I say, in these first two sentences, Bhagavan asks, who am I twice? But he's asking he's asking, these are rhetorical questions, implying I cannot be anything other than you, yet I have risen as if another. And then he concludes the verse in the final line with a beautiful prayer. Velivara. Velivara literally means may you come out, may you come outside. That means may you show yourself as you actually are. Velivara Aruṇācala Avantalayil Virimala Padatine Vete. That means may you come outside Aruṇācala, placing the fully blossomed lotus feet on his head. What that implies is, may you show yourself, thereby placing your fully blossomed lotus feet on his head, means on the head of this rising I, this ego. The spurious I that has come out as if other than you. Since this I cannot be anything other than you, but in the view of this I, in the view of ego, it's, as ego, we seem to have a separate existence. So the prayer is, Aruṇācala is our own reality, the infinite space of pure awareness that's ever shining in our heart as our own being, I am. But we have seemingly risen as something separate from that by grasping the form of a body as I am this body. So the prayer is, may you show yourself as you actually are, thereby crushing this ego. That is, we seem to be ego only so long as we are attending to things other than ourselves. If we turn our attention back within to see who am I, this rising I, no such thing as ego will be found. We will experience ourselves as we actually are. What we actually are is Aruṇācala. So when Aruṇācala comes outside, Bhagavan puts it metaphorically, in other words, when he shows himself as he actually is, what he actually is the pure being awareness. I am. And when we experience ourselves as we actually are, this ego will thereby be crushed. And the ego is a false awareness of ourself. It can only be destroyed by the correct awareness of ourself. So it's only when Aruṇācala shows himself as he actually is that this ego will be crushed. Indirectly, this prayer is the same prayer that he was praying for in the first verse of Aruṇācala Padigam. He prayed if you who by your grace took charge of me are not gracious, giving me sight of you, what will be my state if I leave this body, having pined and suffered intensely in the dark and miserable world? When he says giving me sight of you, that means showing yourself as you actually are, revealing yourself as you actually are, as the infinite being awareness, as as Satyam Jnanam Anantam, as it's put in the Upanishads, the infinite being awareness. So when he shows himself as such, that is what will destroy the ego. So when he says here in this first verse, Unkakshi Tandu, give Unkakshi Tandu Aral, that means graciously showing, giving me sight of you. That is the same prayer that he's praying in this 7th verse when he says, Veli Varara Arunachala. When he says, come outside, that means reveal yourself as you actually are. Show me yourself as you actually are. What you actually are is what I actually am, because I cannot be anything other than you. So when you show yourself as you actually are, you show me what I actually am. And when I see myself as I actually am, ego, which is a false awareness of myself as I am this body, that is destroyed. So throughout these verses, that the same, that is, throughout Aruṇācala Stuti Pancham, all the verses are in different ways, well, all the prayer verses are in different ways praying for what Bhagavan talks about in the very first verse of Aksharammalai. Arunachala mena ahame nine pava ahate verarupai Arunachala. Arunachala, you root out or eradicate the ego of those who meditate on you in the heart as Arunachala, or those who meditate on you, but who meditate on you, recognizing that Arunachala is what is shining in the heart as I. That is also an implied meaning there. So throughout all these verses of Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam, this is essentially what Bhagavan is praying for the total annihilation of ego. That annihilation of ego is the divine wedding, the immutable union, the Akshara Manam. But Bhagavan is praying for an Aksharammalai, and he's praying in all these verses for that. So Bhagavan's devotional poetry in Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam and his Upadesha poetry in Uludunabdu Upadesha Undiya, Anma Vidya, Ekama Panchakam, and so on, they're all essentially, the essence of them are all the same. They're all about eradicating ego. And the way to eradicate ego is to see Aruṇācala. Since Aruṇācala is what we actually are, seeing Aruṇācala means seeing ourselves as we actually are. So when he says, may you come outside Aruṇācala, Velivarai Aruṇācala, that is, may you reveal yourself as you actually are, and thereby annihilate this ego, which he expresses here in a beautiful poetic way, placing your fully blossomed lotus feet on his head. And was crushing him under your lotus feet. So this is a very, very beautiful prayer, and it expresses the very heart of Bhagavan's teachings. But there is nothing other than Aruṇācala. Aruṇācala being what we actually are, ourself as we actually are. As he says in Nana, in the first sentence of the 7th paragraph, Yathatamai uludu Atma-sarupamandre. What actually exists is only Atma-sarupa. Atma-sarupa means the real nature of ourself, or ourself as we actually are, and that is Aruṇācala, who is the one infinite whole, the infinite space of awareness, other than which nothing exists. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Ramanaya. Does anyone have any questions about this verse?
Yes. There's a question from Rati. Would you like to ask? Let me unmute you.
Thank you, Shalini. Yes, Namo Ramanaya, Michael. First of all, I wanted to say that, all these verses are so similar to Akshara Manamala. I was going to ask you a technical question about the verse, but that'll come a little later. I just wanted to, just my love for how beautiful this is, and how in this poem he starts out with the lotus feet that, as you said, let me blossom like a lotus feet at your lotus feet, and then let me melt like a candle, like a candle wax, and then let me be like the deer, caught in your light or headlights or in the sun or whatever it is, and then and let me, also be the, the what is it, the honeybee, really, the
Yes.
honeybee, not the frog trembling and
Yeah.
precarious on the
Yes.
leaf. Because always my problem is, although I'm madly in love with you, O Arunachala, Anbe, Shiva, I love you, Arunachala. But unfortunately, I'm unable to, just keep myself turned inward and facing you, and always bowing at your feet. I'm always being turned outward. So I'm desolate. This makes me desolate. And the beauty, and I was just like, this is a suspense novel in a suspense booklet of poetry in a way. I wanted to read on to the verse after this, which says, I'm so madly in love with you, but yet make me bereft of making me bereft of the fruit of this madness, which is
Yes.
to which is to completely seek refuge in your feet, or be annihilated by you, consumed
Yes.
by you. And
Yes.
I'm not doing that. And again, this is beautiful. And in three verses, he talks about the lotus feet, being at the lotus feet. And in the other verses, he talks about the inability to completely be surrendered and completely, just be one with you and know that there's none other than you. And that is the prayer that's the dilemma that we're all in. And
Yes.
that's what we all face. Because even though, as I'm even going deeper in the path, there's always this pull outwards too, which is so terrible. I can see the terribleness of the whole thing. But still, what is one to do but just be consumed? And as you
Yes.
said, as you always said, Michael, the way we do it is only not by even asking questions, other than just by turning within. As he says in the final verse, let me just dwell on you, the rare medicine that is
Mm.
Aruna Hill. Let me dwell on you and your being, be
Yes.
one with your being. So, but again, the technical question I was going to ask you is, he wrote all his other poetry in the Venba, and in this he uses the chir, en chir, yeru chir verutam,
Yeah.
verutam, which
Yeah.
is the 6-7 metrical feet, and
Yeah.
then he uses that for the first 6 verses, for 6 or 7 verses, and the remaining verses he uses the enchiritam, which is the 8 metrical feet. And so, what is the difference between Venba and this type of metrical feet?
This is what is called viritam. Viritam is a Tamil form of the Sanskrit word vrita. Certain types of verses in Sanskrit are called vrita. In um, in Tamil, there are many different types of meter. Um, for this sort of stotra, this this viritam is a lot of the songs of Devaram, Tirvasakam, and Nalayara Divya Prabandham. Some of them are Vemba, but many of them are various types of viritam, and some are Katalai Kariturai. These all different meters. So they're different ways of expressing the love. This is all love poetry. And this Bhagavan doesn't have any design when he composes this. This Patikam and Ashtakam came to him completely spontaneously, without any outward prompting. And all of Patikam is in Ensiv, sorry, Erisiv Viritam, the 7 foot per line, and it's Ashtakam that is the Ensiv Viritam. They're very similar meters, but slightly different. That Ashtakam is a slightly longer meter, but a similar style of meter. The Vemba is the classical, it's a very, it's an archetypical Tamil meter. I don't think there's any other language in the world that has a meter like Vemba, it's a very special meter. And Bhagavan, as you say, composed many of his verses. In that Stuti Panchakam, Aruṇācala Pancharatnam is all in Vemba. Uludu Napadu is all in Vemba. A lot of Uludu Napadu Anubandham and other verses of Bhagavan, and a lot of his translated verses are in Vemba. So it's a very beautiful meter in Tamil, but there's so much variety in Tamil poetry. There's so much variety and so much. There's room for infinite variety. So the poets don't sit down and decide, I'm going to compose in such and such a meter. As Sadhu Om often used to say, it's just like a valve inside in the heart. And when the grace opens that valve, the poetry just comes flowing forth. It's not that there's it's not as if there's a doer there doing it. It just comes spontaneously.
Yes. And again, it's also even for those who may not know Tamil, even this poem, that the verse you just read, it's so alliterative, it's so
yes.
viva. But so, and again, it's, it all starts, as you said, it came from the heart, from Bhagavan. It was so spontaneous, as is for most poets too. But when he said, Karunayal, you who by your grace took charge of me. So in a sense, he's taking charge of all of us with his grace. But to feel that grace even more and more and more powerfully, we need to just subside in him, you know. And that is what the beauty of these verses really point out to.
Yes, and that's what this verse is particularly praying for. But I'm not going to subside. My nature is to rise. That's the nature of ego. Nature of ego is to rise and go outwards. So it's for you to show yourself and thereby place your fully blossomed lotus feet on the head of this ego and crush it.
Yes. You to show yourself. You to come out and reveal yourself.
Exactly.
Aruṇācalam. Don't hide. I need to see you. I need to see your full form and the state of your and the space state. They use the word space too in this verse.
Yes, space. The space is referring to this, to the Chittakasa, the space of pure awareness.
Space, the feet and the space, which is a very concrete image and a very huge, powerfully infinite image as well.
Yes, exactly.
So the beauty of the both images. Yes. Thank you, Michael. I don't want to take up time because everyone has so many questions for you.
Yes, right.
Thank you. Namo Ramanaya.
Namo Ramanaya.
There's a question about a line from Akshar Manamalai.
Yes.
And the verse is Ramana main. I don't know Tamil, so Ramana main drur etain.
Ramana drur etain Roshangaladere Ramitida Chayava Aruṇācala.
That's it. So that's it. And the question is, are these statements given by Bhagwan or is it Muruganar's words?
No, this is Bhagavan had composed Aksharamlai before Murugana came. This is all Bhagavan's words. But he says to Aruṇācala, I called you Ramana. Ramana means the beloved, the husband. So this is because he's composing. This is a love poem. This is a poem that Bhagavan is praying from a perspective of a young girl who her lover has come to her home and eloped with her, taken her out and kept her a prisoner in the cave of his heart. And she's praying for the full consummation of their union, a full, the total union with him. So in this verse, this is verse 90.
Michael, 1 second. It's me. Actually, the first question is from Akshara Ramana Malai. Ramanan endrureithen rosham
Yes.
kolladene namitida cheyava Arunachala. This is first question. And this, I wanted to understand what this line is, and this is one. And the second question is, Sri Ramana Padamalai, in these, from these like there are some statements saying that, it's my responsibility to take care, leave all the, the problems to me and I will take care of you, and all this kind of statements are there. So are these statements given by Bhagavan or it is from Muruganar? So that is the second question.
Okay. Well, I'll talk about this verse first, and then I'll talk about that. So, what he says here, Ramanan Duritain. I called you Ramana. In other words, I called you my beloved. I called you my husband. Roshan Kaladane. Do not take offense. Any Ramitida Cheyava Arunachala. Come and Ramitida, come and make me happy. Come and that, yes, it's a prayer for that union. So this is entirely Bhagavan's words, and it's though he's Bhagavan is also called Ramana, but here in this context he's addressing Arunachala as Ramana, and in the final verse of Aksharamlai he addresses Arunachala as Arunachala Ramana, the beloved Arunachala. Malayali Arunachala Ramana in Malay and Indaral Arunachala. Giving me your garland, that means the garland of the marital garland, giving me your garland, accept this garland of mine. And he addresses Arunachala as Arunachala Ramana.
So this statement is similar to what we expressed. What you expressed it today with the Padigam. So this is like, again, it is stating that it is one without a second, isn't it, Michael?
Absolutely. See the second verse of Aksharamlai. Arahusam Darambol Ahamum Niyum Mutru Abhinama Irupom. May we be, Mutru means completely, may we be completely non-different, like Arahu and Sundaram. Arahu and Sundaram, Arahu is a Tamil word that means beauty. Sundaram is a Sanskrit word that means beauty. The words are different, but the meaning is the same. So they are just like Arahu and Sundaram are completely non-different. That's one meaning. And Arahu and Sundaram are also the names of Bhagavan's mother and father. So just like they were one in their union, their marriage, may we be, but he says they're mutru, completely non-different. So Bhagavan's, that is in Aksharamlai, in Patikam, and all these hymns of the five of the Stuti Panchakam. If we read these and understand them, we can be in no doubt about the oneness of Bhakti and Jnana. Bhakti and Jnana are not two different paths. What is called the path of Jnana is the culmination of the path of Bhakti. When ultimately the path of Bhakti has to end with us giving ourselves wholly to God. Because that is what surrender is, giving ourselves wholly to God. When we give ourselves wholly to God, what remains? Only God. So that is Ekameva Advaityam, one only without a second. So all these are Advaitic prayers, prayers for that complete dissolution of this illusory sense of separation that is inevitable when we rise as ego. When we rise as ego, we limit ourselves and thereby seemingly separate ourselves from the infinite whole that we actually are. That infinite whole that we actually are, that is Arunachala. Regarding Ramana Padamalai, that is Murugana's poetry, but Murugana is often in his poetry, he's expressing Bhagavan's teachings in his poetry. So a lot of verses of Padamalai en something like en pardam. En means Endru, thus said, pardam. Pardam, he's referring to Bhagavan as the feet, the divine feet. That is the divine feet of God, and his feet are one and the same. So it is he's referring to Bhagavan as the divine feet, and he's saying those divine feet said this, they said that. So many of the verses of Padamalai are recordings of things that Bhagavan said.
Okay. Because like this line, seek my grace within my heart, I will drive away darkness and show you the light, and this is my responsibility.
Yes. Bhagavan says the same thing in Aksharamlai, verse 14. Auve polenakun arule tandene aluva dungadan Aruṇācala. It's your duty, like a mother bestowing your grace and taking charge of me. This is your duty. So yes, it is. It is, but he has full responsibility for saving us. But we have to cooperate. If we're always trying to run outwards, if we're always enthusiastically running out towards the world, our prayer for him to save us is insincere. We have to be willing to give ourselves wholly to him. That's why in the 12th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan gives a very great assurance. He said, God and Guru are in truth not different. Just like the prayer, just like what has been caught in the jaws of a tiger cannot escape, cannot come back again. Those who have been caught in the glance of Guru's grace will surely be saved and never forsaken. But then he adds an important proviso at the end. Eninum Guru Kartya Varipadi Tavaradu Nadikavendam. Nevertheless, it's necessary to follow without fail in accordance with the path shown by Guru. So we have to try our best to follow his path, but it's his responsibility to save us. But he will save us only when we're willing to be saved and are trying to follow his path. Whether we succeed or not doesn't matter. We need to try, because that shows our willingness. If we are willing to give ourselves to him, he will take us. It's his responsibility to take us.
Thank you, Mike.
Right.
The next question is the one which came by email.
Yes.
I don't think there's another question on the verses. No. So there is a quote from Sri Bhagavan that is, your own self-realization is the greatest service you can render the world. Could you please elaborate how and what Bhagavan meant by this?
Right. Okay. As with many of Bhagavan's teachings, and as with Vedanta in general, these teachings can be interpreted at different levels. But let us start with, just like Krishna in the Gita started with the highest teachings, and then he came down to give other teachings to suit people at different levels. And just like Bhagavan, he would always at first try to turn people's attention back to themselves. Who is it who's asking this question? But when people are not ready to accept that, then he will come down to whatever level they're at. So if we take this statement, in the light of Bhagavan's core teachings, the meaning is very, very simple. If you're dreaming, and in your dream you see a war, you see a famine, you see a pandemic, or suffering in so many different forms. In any form, if you see suffering in your dream, what is the greatest good you can do to all those suffering people you see in your dream? The greatest good is to wake up. Because if you wake up, the whole dream is dissolved. Likewise, according to Bhagavan, this whole life of ours is just a dream. So all the suffering we see in this world is suffering we are seeing in a dream. So in order to put an end to all this suffering, the only effective way to put an end to all suffering is to wake up from a dream. So when we wake up from a dream, we not only end our suffering, we end all the suffering that we were seeing in the dream. So that is the deepest meaning that Bhagavan that is implied there by Bhagavan. But I cannot remember now the exact context in which Bhagavan said that, but I suspect the context he said was to someone who would have been saying something about all the problems of the world, and shouldn't we be trying to do service to the world? Shouldn't we be trying to help the world, or something like that? When people said such things, this was a very typical response of Bhagavan. The greatest good you can do to the world is to know yourself. He didn't elaborate upon it, but he just said that much and left it to each person to understand according to their own level of understanding. That is, not everyone will be willing to accept the deeper meaning, but it's all a dream. And if you wake up from this dream, you put an end to all the problems of the world. The majority of people are not ready to accept that. Sometimes when people came to Bhagavan and talked about the problems of the world, Bhagavan said, he who has created this world knows how to take care of it. Leave it to him. In other words, all the problems of this world, they're God's. It's for God to take care of these things. If they're bad, if there are things happening in the world that we consider to be bad, those things cannot be happening without the consent of God. So why God allows all these things that we consider so bad, why he allows these to happen, we maybe cannot fully understand. But God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-loving. Because he's all-knowing, nothing can happen without his knowledge. Because he's all-powerful, nothing can happen without his consent. And because he's all-loving, he will not allow anything to happen that is not for the ultimate good of all concerned. So from our narrow perspective, we say, oh, these wars are bad, pandemics are bad, famines are bad, earthquakes are bad, typhoons are bad, floods are bad, wildfires are bad. This is all from our perspective, because we have a very narrow perspective, but God has an infinite perspective. So he knows what is for ultimate good for all. So Bhagavan repeatedly said in so many ways, whenever anyone expressed concerns about the condition of the world, Bhagavan said, leave it to God. If you want to do good to the world, you know yourself. Know your own self-realization is the greatest good you can do to the world. So, as I say, we can each understand it according to our own level of understanding. But the deepest meaning is that all this suffering we see in the world, it's all just a dream. And if we want to put an end to all this suffering, all we need to do is to wake up from this dream. Waking up from we are dreaming so long as we rise as ego. Ego is a false awareness of ourselves. So if we know ourselves as we actually are, ego will thereby be annihilated and all dreams will come to an end. So that's the deepest implication. If you're not willing to accept that deeper implication, you can take it, at least if you attain self-realization, you're not doing any harm to the world. So Sadhu Om used to sometimes say, it is not necessary for us to do any good in this world. If we can at least avoid doing any harm, that is sufficient. That's a great achievement. If we can avoid doing harm. So that's one way. Another thing Bhagavan says in in Guruvachaka Kavai, Bhagavan says in one place, the mere presence of a jnani on this earth is the greatest good for the earth. So there's so many different, we can explain this from so many different perspectives. But ultimately, the best good we can do is to know ourselves. In other words, to surrender ourselves completely to Bhagavan and to merge back in him. When we merge, everything merges along with us. As he says in verse 26 of Ulirunaplu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what this ego is giving up everything. So if we want to put an end to all the suffering in the world, all we need to do is to put an end to our rising as ego by turning within and thereby surrendering ourselves completely to Bhagavan.
The next question, Michael. Can you please share your thoughts on addiction? In your opinion, is it a lifelong disease or curable through self-inquiry? And also, is there such a condition as having a spiritual ego? If so, is it worse than having an ego?
If it's ego is the false awareness, ego, it's not spiritual. If it's spiritual, it's not ego. Ego is that which is aware of itself as I am this body. That is a false awareness of ourself. The spirit is I am. But when that I am is seemingly conflated with adjuncts as I am this body, that is what is called ego. So if we are spiritual, that means we separate this I am from all the adjuncts and remain as we actually are. So when we know ourselves as we actually are, in other words, when we know ourselves as the spirit, the infinite Satchit, the pure being awareness, then there is no ego. When we rise as ego, it's because we have seemingly covered the pure being that we actually are with adjuncts and by mistaking ourselves to be this body. So no, there's no such thing as a spiritual ego. It's a contradiction in terms. A spiritual ego is like saying a square circle. Either it's a circle or it's a square. You can't have a square circle or a circular square. They're contradictory terms. As contradictory as a square circle is a spiritual ego. I think sometimes people use the term spiritual ego referring to people who believe they have attained some high spiritual state, either believe it or want others to believe it, whichever the case may be. And it is said they have a spiritual ego. Well, it's still ego, and it's not really spiritual, but if that's what people mean by it, obviously that's not good. But that is true spirituality is humility. The humbler we are, the closer we are to being truly spiritual. So the subsidence of ego is what spirituality is all about. The spiritual path is the path by which we as egos subside and dissolve back into our source. That was that part of the question. And there was more to the question. I've forgotten what the other part was.
Yeah. Yeah, the second part was, or rather the first part, could you share your thoughts on addiction? In your opinion, is it a lifelong disease or curable through self-inquiry?
We are all addicts. We are addicts to that is our very rising as ego is an addiction. We are addicted to As Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Ulladu about describing ego, grasping form, it comes into being. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. So the very nature of ego is grasping form. Grasping form means being aware of things other than ourself, attending to things other than ourself. This is the root of all addictions. So this is the first addiction and the root of all other addictions. So if we're addicted to smoking or to alcohol or to drugs or anything, that is a secondary addiction. The primary addiction is our addiction to attending to things other than ourselves. So addiction is the very nature of ego. So yes, it's for ego, it's a lifelong disease. That is, so long as there's ego, there is addiction. To be free of addiction, we need to be free of ego. We need to cease rising as ego. The death of ego alone is the ending of all addictions. All these secondary addictions, like alcoholism or drug addiction or things, these are things that can be overcome. But it's not people who are addicted to alcohol or to drugs or something, it's often not at all easy to overcome this addiction. But it is possible if we have some addiction and are trying to overcome that addiction. Help is always available in the form of grace, but we need to pray for that grace, and we need to show our prayer for grace is sincere only if we try our best. So if we are suffering from some addiction, we should try to overcome that addiction. Addiction is all that is. What leads to addiction is our vasanas. Vasanas are inclinations. We are never bound by our inclinations. But the more we allow ourselves to be swayed by any particular inclination, the stronger that inclination becomes. So if we've got a very strong inclination, like an addiction, a very strong inclination, for example, to smoking or to drinking alcohol or whatever, it's not easy to overcome that, but it is possible. But we must have we must try our best. We must have that genuine willingness to give up that addiction. Then grace will certainly help us. In a slightly different, I don't know exact context, but in some context, someone asked Bhagavan, is there no hope for me? And Bhagavan said, there is hope. There is hope. So there's hope for all of us. But we must be willing to, as Bhagavan said, I referred earlier to the 12th paragraph of Nana. Bhagavan has said, once we have come under this, once we've been caught in the glance of Guru's grace, we will certainly be saved and never forsaken. But we have to try our best to follow the path. So if we happen to have an addiction to whatever it may be, we have to try our best to overcome that addiction. And as I say, we all have addiction to attending to things other than ourselves. We need to try to overcome that addiction by trying to attend to ourselves as much as possible. The more we attend to ourselves, the more our love to attend to ourselves will be strengthened. That's the Satvasana will be strengthened. And the Vishaya Vasanas, the inclination to attend to other things, will grow progressively weaker. But we have to try our best to attend to ourselves and thereby surrender ourselves. Everything else will be taken care of by grace.
The next question is in relation to what you said earlier, Michael, that all is for the greater good. Could you please comment on Ramana telling Papaji to go and assist his family at the time of partition after Papaji had said it was all a dream? Thank you.
I don't know about that incident, but what I would say is, yes, all this is a dream, but in a dream we have to act in an appropriate manner. If, for example, if we see someone, a person starving on the side of the road, and if we have the means to provide food for them, we shouldn't just go by and say, oh, it's all a dream, so let them starve. That's obviously, we haven't really understood, because whatever we do to help that starving person, that is also part of a dream. So all the actions we do are as much a part of a dream as everything that we see outside. So we have to act in this world in an appropriate manner. So though the whole world is unreal, the whole world being unreal includes our own actions are unreal, but we have to act in an appropriate manner. Because if we act in an inappropriate manner, we act in an inappropriate manner only when the ego is very strong will we act in an inappropriate manner. The more we subside, the more we will naturally be inclined to do whatever is appropriate in each given situation. So the idea that, I mean, during the partition, terrible things were happening. And of course, if your family is on the wrong side of a partition, it's obviously, if you've got a family, you have a responsibility to take care of them. To think that you can just say it's all a dream and let them suffer, that shows a complete lack of understanding. It's or very, very superficial and inappropriate understanding of the teaching. In the dream, we have to, all our actions are part of a dream, and we should act in an appropriate manner according to the circumstances that we find ourselves in this dream. I just, that's the end of my answer to that question. I'm just recalling the question that I was asked earlier about Ramana Maharshi. So many or probably most of the things that Murugan says there, that Bhagavan said, is probably what Bhagavan said in words. But there may be certain things there that Bhagavan said without saying. In other words, Bhagavan said without actually, things that he made Murugan understand without actually saying them. Because Bhagavan's ultimate teaching is silence. So the more we subside, the more we are tuning ourselves to his silent teachings. So there are many things that Murugan may have understood without Bhagavan saying explicitly. Like Bhagavan may not have said explicitly, it's my responsibility, but he made Murugan understand that. So we can't necessarily say that everything that Murugan has said there is actual words that Bhagavan spoke, but it's what Bhagavan made Murugan understand. So what Murugan has expressed in Padamalai and in so many other, so much of his other poetry is very faithfully conveying the spirit of Bhagavan's teachings, if not always the exact words. Because Murugan had surrendered himself completely to Bhagavan. When in the first song in Ramana Sannidhi Murai, Ramana Sannidhi Murai is a collection of songs that Murugan wrote on Bhagavan. They're hymns, devotional songs. The first one is Ramana Puranam. Many lines of Ramana Puranam were actually composed by Bhagavan. When Ramana Puranam when Ramana Sandhi Marai was first being printed, I think it was about I'm not sure, maybe sometime in the 1930s. I can't remember now the first, which year it was first published. But when the manuscripts were sent to the press, Murugan had put an asterisk and had given a footnote from here for the next 100 lines or something. It was composed by Bhagavan. When the proofs came and Bhagavan saw the proofs, when he saw that footnote there, he looked at Murugan and said, only these 100 lines were, I'm not sure, and when I say 100 lines, that's a guess. I don't know how many lines it was. Only these 100 lines were composed by Bhagavan? And Murugan at once understood, and he removed the footnote and the asterisk. The implication of what Bhagavan said is, it's all composed by him. So when those poets who are completely surrendered to Bhagavan, Bhagavan sings through them, using their mind, speech, and body. So it's all ultimately Bhagavan. Sadhu Om told me that when Bhagavan was still physically present, whenever he composed a song, during his first 1 or 2 visits, he actually sang his songs in front of Bhagavan. But afterwards, he didn't feel inclined to sing in front of Bhagavan because he didn't want to draw attention to himself. So whenever he composed a song, he would give the song he would write it and he would give the paper to Bhagavan. And Bhagavan would read it, and occasionally Bhagavan would make a small correction or something and return it. And he said he used to feel satisfaction when he offered his songs to Bhagavan. But then he used to think to himself, how foolish am I, thinking that I have to offer it to Bhagavan. From where do these verses come from, if not from Bhagavan himself? So offering the songs to Bhagavan is like the analogy that Bhagavan used of offering the toe of the Jaggery Ganesha back to Ganesha. That is, there's a story Bhagavan told of a poor wayfarer who used to carry a small little vigraha, a small little idol of Ganapati with him to do puja. One time when he was traveling, he had forgotten to pack his little idol of Ganesha. So when he came to time for him to eat, he wanted to do his puja, but he found his Ganesha wasn't there. So he he had some vellum, some jaggery, that's unrefined sugar. He made that into the shape of a Ganapati, and he did his puja to that. But when it was over, he found he had no jaggery left to do as offering. So he pinched the toe off Ganesha and offered it back to Ganesha. Bhagavan said, our surrender is just like that. Nothing belongs to us, but we say we are surrendering to God. Actually, we're returning to God what is already God's. But that's a different thing. But Sadhu Om used to say, when he used to think to himself sometimes when he derives satisfaction by showing his songs to Bhagavan, but this is just like offering the jaggery, the toe back to Ganesha. But these songs all come only from Bhagavan, because from where else can they come? So like that, whatever Murugan has composed, because he had completely surrendered himself to Bhagavan, it was Bhagavan who was composing through him.
Angelica, did you want to ask a question?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Michael, going very deep and everything, like in my heart, the biggest inclination and desire is almost like I almost sometimes I feel like I cannot, like it's so much, like it's like I really, really want to know. I want to remember. I want to,
Yeah,
like I
yes.
just want to stay there permanently. And sometimes I've been waking up and thinking, I wonder if next life, the inclination to remember who am I, or to actually be there, will continue in the next life, or you don't, or
Yeah,
you start from fresh.
definitely. If at all there's a next life, that is what we take from one life to the next. That is, it's we as ego who go from one life to the next, and what we take with us is our vasanas. So, if we have been following Bhagavan's path in this life, that inclination to follow this path will go with us. So, in effect, we will, in the next life, we'll start off from where we ended in this life. There's no going back. Once we've been drawn to this path, even though we shed this body, we will continue on the same path.
That's
Krishna also says that in the Gita. Those who are on this path of devotion, if they leave the body without attaining the goal, it will continue in future lives.
Thank
There's
you
no
so
doubt about that at all.
Thank you
But
so much.
we shouldn't be worried about that, whether it may happen in this lifetime, it may happen after 100 lifetimes. What we should be focusing on is trying our best here and now to follow the path that Bhagavan has shown us. When we will attain the goal, that's in Bhagavan's hands. We have to do what he has asked us to do, which is trying more and more to turn our attention within and thereby surrender ourselves to him.
Thank you so much.
There's a question from Sanjay Lohia. Just
Yes. So, so this is from your latest video. You said one place, the latest video upload. Infinity is something not very big. That is, infinity means without any limits at all. Individuality means a separate existence. Infinity is not the sum of all finite things. Infinity is beyond all limitations. This is what you said.
Yes.
So my question, sir, is when you say infinity is something not very big, it is not clear. I thought infinity was indeed something very big. Yes, it is limitless, but doesn't limitless imply something very big? Thank you.
It is described in the Upanishads or somewhere, I can't remember where. Brahman is bigger than the biggest and smaller than the smallest. Why is it smaller than the smallest? Because it's contained within everything. Why is it bigger than the biggest? Because everything is contained within it. So I can't remember. I don't remember saying that it's not very big. But what I meant by that is, when we try to conceive of the infinite, we think only in finite terms. We can never actually know the infinite without being the infinite. As Bhagavan says in verse 4 of Uludunapadu, if oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. If oneself is not a form, who can see their forms and how to do so? Can what is seen be otherwise, be of another nature than the eye that sees it? The real I is oneself, the infinite I. So what is infinite is formless. All forms are finite. So we can know the infinite only by being the infinite. That's why Bhagavan says, so long as we experience ourselves as a form, we cannot conceive of God as anything but a form. Even if we say, oh, I don't worship God in form. I believe God is formless. I believe he's infinite. That's just a belief. That's just a mental concept. Can we conceive of the infinite? How can you have a finite, all conceptions are finite. How can you have a finite conception of that which is infinite? You cannot. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 3 of Aruṇācala Ashtakam, when I approach thinking of you as a form, you yourself have settled as a hill on earth. If one thinks of your form as formless, one is like someone who wanders the world to see the sky. That's a very subtle analogy Bhagavan gives there. If we think of his form as formless, we are like someone who wanders the world to see the sky. If we're wandering the world to see the sky means the space. It's ever present. The sky may seem to be somewhere beyond the distant mountain, but if we go to the distant mountain, we'll find the sky has gone beyond a further mountain. We can never reach the sky so long as we are looking for it as something other than ourselves. So if we try to conceive of God as formless, it is futile. We cannot, because any thought, any conception is a mental form. So how to know God as formless? He then says in the next sentence, when without thinking one thinks deeply of your form, one's form will cease to exist, like a salt doll in the ocean. When he says thinking, when one thinks without thinking of your form, that means of your form here means your true form or swarupa. His true form is just I am. So if we think without thinking of I am, that is attending to I am is not a mental activity. That's why he calls it thinking without thinking. So if we attend to I am, our own form will cease to exist, like a salt doll that is immersed in the ocean. And then he says, when I know myself, what else is my form? That means, what am I other than you? So we cannot adequately conceive of God as formless. So long as we take ourselves to be a form, it's appropriate to worship God in form. If we want to know the formless nature of God, we need to turn our attention back within to his true form, which is ever shining in the heart as I. That is his formless form. And that is not thinking, but just being.
So, as you say, infinity or Brahman is bigger than the biggest and is smaller than the smallest.
Yes.
So that makes sense and that makes it clear, because in this video at around 2 hours, you said this in what context, I'm not sure, that infinity is something not very big. So
what I meant by that is we think of infinite, we think everything added together makes the infinite. It doesn't. If you add any number of finite things together, the sum total of all finite things will be finite. So people think in mathematics, they talk of infinity, but the mathematical infinity is just a concept. But when we're talking about infinity in a metaphysical sense, in a spiritual sense, it's beyond we cannot conceive of it. It is devoid of limitations of any kind whatsoever.
So exactly, we cannot say that it is big or small or something like that. It is infinity beyond our conception.
Big and small, they're a pair of opposites.
Yes.
And as Bhagavan says in verse 9 of Ulladu Napadu, these pairs of opposites exist only in the view of ego. When we investigate what this ego is, these pairs of opposites will cease to exist. He also says it in verse 7 of Aruṇācala Padigam. But when we investigate ourselves, to whom are all these things, we will thereby reach the heart lotus. We'll be seated on the throne of the heart. And then the dream of, how does he put it? Ahampuram, inside and outside. Iruvine, the two karmas, good karmas and bad karmas. Irojembam, death and birth. Imbu tumbu, that is happiness and misery. Irul oli, darkness and light. That the dream of all these pairs of opposites will not exist. So all big and small, these are all finite concepts. The infinite is beyond all finite concepts. So it's beyond big and it's beyond small. Even to say it's bigger than the biggest and smaller than the smallest, it's just a way of saying what cannot be said in words.
It makes sense.
Yes.
It makes sense. Basically,
so, the only way to know the infinite is to be infinite. And to be infinite, all we need to do, because we are always infinite, but we seem to be finite because of this false identification, I am this body. So if we give up ego, that is being infinite, as we always actually are.
So in fact, no concepts are needed. For the infinite, we don't need to have a concept.
That's why Bhagavan says, thinking without thinking. When one thinks without thinking of your form, that means when we attend to you in the heart, as you actually are, we will dissolve in you like a salt doll in the ocean.
Being is knowing. So yes. Being infinite is knowing infinite.
Exactly.
On that you cannot have a concept of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Michael, the next question. When you say act in an appropriate manner, is this what Bhagavan is referring to in UNA verse 39 in applying non-duality to actions in the worldly life?
Yes. That's the verse where he says, always have a Dvaita at heart. Do not express a Dvaita in action. Expressing a Dvaita in action is the height of foolishness, because action implies two. So action is possible only in the state of duality. So in the state of non-duality, there is no action. So trying to put Advaita into action shows a complete misunderstanding of Advaita.
Michael, just to clarify, do you mean that, and this is something which I've heard, I thought this is what Bhagavan says and what some other teachers have said, that that sort of in everyday life, one doesn't sort of think of it as non-dual in the sense that there is no distinction or something like that, which there is at an ultimate level. That, for example, we talked about this earlier when somebody cracked a coconut or sort of water on one, so that, we do need to behave appropriately because the world is a world of duality.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And which we have to navigate according to the norms of duality, what's appropriate morally and so on. Okay, practically. Okay.
So long as we feel that we are the doer of actions, as we all do, but so long as we identify with the body and mind as I, we experience ourselves as the doer of actions. So we are already experiencing duality. So we have to act appropriately. This is so-called Vivaharika Satya. In Vivaharika Satya, you need to, all action is within Vivaharika Satya. None of it is real, but it needs to be appropriate to the circumstances. As Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, God exists in all, but you don't for that reason go and embrace a tiger.
Yes, it's something which is talked about by quite a few gurus, that basically sort of in everyday life, for example, if you have to cross the river, it's not simply that you wish for it and it'll get done. You've been given the means to do it by, whatever power that be, the power, so to speak, and all that sort of thing. Okay. The next question is, my dog passed away and I feel such a big sadness and miss him. I know that Bhagwan loved all animals. How can I let go and feel peace with his passing?
Well, firstly, why we are attached to other living beings, whether human or non-human, we take them to be a body because we take ourselves to be a body. So when anyone we love, whether that the one we love is human or non-human, doesn't matter, anyone we love passes away, it is naturally a sadness for us. But the way to put an end to the sadness of bereavement, the only permanent solution to the sadness of bereavement, is to die ourselves. Not for the body to die, because that's not the real death. If the body dies, then we're going to be born again. The ego must die. Only when ego dies will we be forever free of the sadness of bereavement. So long as we rise as ego, we will all inevitably experience the sadness of bereavement. It's inevitable because all living bodies are transient. And so some of the ones, we will pass away before some of the ones we love, and other ones we loved will pass away before us. So the bereavement, the sadness of bereavement is a great lesson to us, to remind us of the fleeting nature of our life and the foolishness of being attached to this life. Why we are attached to other people or to other animals? Because we're attached to this body as ourself. So the root attachment is the dehabhimana, the body attachment, the body identification. So it is sad for anyone who suffers bereavement. It's very sad, but this is samsara. Samsara is a mixture of pleasure and pain. So long as your dog was alive, it gave you great pleasure. And you would have given it great pleasure. You would have had good times together. Once it passes away, you have to pay the price for all those good times, which is the sadness of bereavement. We all suffer bereavement so many times in our life. But we should learn from this, learn how transitory this is. And another way, when we are saddened by bereavement, ultimately what we are, as Bhagavan said, when we weep for those who have passed away, it's really ourself we are sorry for. That is, the one who has passed away is happy. They are free from the burden of the body. But we miss their bodily presence, so we are sad for ourselves. So we need to understand that, as Krishna says to Arjuna in the Gita, when in the second chapter, Arjuna was thinking, how can I fight against my grandfather, my gurus, my relatives, all these people I revere so much? How can I fight against them? How can I kill them? And Krishna said, they're already killed by me. But he said, there never was a time when they were not or when you were not. Because that doesn't mean, but some people interpret that to mean, but the jiva is eternal, the soul is eternal. That's not what Krishna meant. What we all actually are is eternal. That is, as Brahman, we are all eternal. The jiva came into existence, and sooner or later it will cease to exist. So we are all these many lives that we go through, this is all a journey. So when anyone we love, whether a human person or an animal or a person in some other form, when they pass away, their journey is continuing. So we shouldn't feel sad for them. We should recognize what we're really sad for is ourselves, because we miss them. Sometimes when the news of someone passing away came to Bhagavan, sometimes he said, good, they are relieved of the burden of the body. So death is not something that we should be ready to welcome death when it comes. But ultimately, so long as we've got the life is in this body, we should try to make the most use of this, so that we should try to die before dying. That is, this ego, we should try to annihilate this ego here and now, without waiting for the death of the body. Because if the body dies before ego, then the cycle will continue again and again and again.
The next question, Michael. Could Michael comment on the following statement? If the I thought resides in the physical body, is it necessary to continue with self-inquiry once we cease to identify with the body and mind? Thank you.
What do we mean by cease to identify with the body and mind? The very nature of ego is to experience itself as I am this body. And the body in this context includes the mind. So long as we are aware of anything other than ourselves, we're aware of other things because we're already identified with this body. Merely thinking I am not this body is not giving up the identification with the body. The identification with the body is destroyed only when ego is destroyed. Otherwise, if we give up identification with one body, the identification switches to some other body. Now we experience this body as I. In dream, we experience some other body as I. As Bhagavan says in verse 25, leaving form, it grasps form. So when ego is when ego is destroyed, then only will the identification with the body be given up. And then there'll be no one left to say, to ask any questions about whether this is necessary or that is necessary. So long as we are aware of anything other than pure being, anything other than what we experience in sleep, ego is still alive and active, and the identification with the body is still there. So the vichara and surrender must continue.
The next question, Michael. As we naturally move towards what brings temporary happiness in the dream and move away from what brings unhappiness in the dream, while at the same time in the dream, to the extent possible, turning within and investigating who am I, while we still have an ego, could you say any more about how humility might function in the dream?
Humility is, the more we progress in the spiritual path, the more humility will, that is, humility is nothing but subsidence of ego. The subsidence of ego is brought about by self-investigation and self-surrender. So humility is not something that we can, to the extent that we are not, humility is present. To the extent that we rise, the humility is absent. So humility is nothing but the subsidence of ego. And that is what this spiritual path is all about. Subsiding, subsiding, subsiding. That is what Bhagavan's teachings, that is what Bhagavan is teaching us, to subside. And we subside to the extent to which we attend to ourselves. In the final paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan says, if oneself rises, everything rises. If oneself subsides, everything subsides. To the extent to which one is beautifully expressed in Tamil, but very difficult to adequately express in English, but it means something to the effect of, to the extent to which we behave subsidingly, to that extent there is goodness. That means behave subsidingly means to the extent to which we as ego subside and let the life go on, to that extent it is good. So Bhagavan's teachings are all about subsidence. And then he concludes the final sentence, he says, if one curbs the mind, one can live anywhere. Curb the mind means, again, it's another way of saying subsiding. Curbing means curbing the rising of mind, and we curb the rising of mind by holding on to self-attentiveness.
The last question, Michael. I watched a clip where Michael clarified about being in the present or in the now is as beingness. And that is not being in present meant as taught by other teachers like Eckhart Tolle. My understanding is if someone has truly been in beingness for a moment, it must have been the end of the ego there by the end of the person. Is my understanding correct?
Yes, well, during the stage of practice, we are trying to be more and more. That is, to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we thereby subside. And to the extent to which we subside, we come close to just being. But when we attend to ourselves keenly enough, we will subside completely and dissolve back into our source. That is the state of perfect being, which is what being in the present truly means. So, yes, if we experience the state of just being perfectly for a moment, that the ego is thereby annihilated. But during practice, we are trying to experience the state of just being by holding on to our being, and our being is ever present. So being in the present means holding on to our being. So long as we are attending to anything that is happening, thoughts or external events or anything, we are in the flow of time from part. That is all actions, all events, all happenings, all changes occur in the flow of time. So if we think we are being in the present by attending to whatever is happening now, we are actually not being in the present, we are being in the flow of time. When we actually, the present is an ever motionless being. It is our own ever motionless being. So then there's no change, no happening, no actions in the actual present moment. That's what Bhagavan means by being in the present, just being as we actually are. What is it that makes the present moment present? What is it that makes the present place present? It is the presence of ourself. So to really be in the here and now, we need to be in our own being. So long as we're attending to anything other than ourself, we are caught up in the flow of time. Which never stands still. So if we want to bring time to a standstill, we need to come to a standstill by just being as we are. And we can just be as we are by holding on to our being, to the exclusion of everything else.
Sanjay wanted to ask a question.
So, sir, one more question. You narrated the story of a Malayali person whom you met at Sri Ramanashramam. You saw him sitting with his eyes closed for hours on end inside the old hall. He told you that since he had understood what needs to be understood about Bhagwan's teachings, he has no further need for Bhagwan's teachings. So he said he was just practicing meditation now, sitting for long hours in the hall. So you also said that after a while he stopped coming to the ashram, and people found out that sadly he had lost his mental balance. My question is, sir, what should we infer from this story?
Well, he wasn't actually Malayali. He was a Telugu devotee, and he told me that he had thrown away his glasses because after reading Who Am I, he understood all we have to do is to do self-investigation. And he was there for a long time. This is back in the 70s. He would throughout the day he would be sitting in the Bhagavan's old hall. He was a very nice, quiet gentleman, but all of a sudden he disappeared. And I heard that people said that he had lost his mental balance. Bhagavan doesn't recommend going to extremes. Bhagavan, that is, we need to try to be self-attentive as much as possible, but it's not necessary to be self-attentive. We don't have to sit with our eyes closed. So I can't say anything particular, but we have to infer, but it was just it was a sad story, because I think he was a sincere person, but we need to have viveka, we need to have discrimination, we need to use our judgment. It's easy to sit all day long with our eyes closed, but are we able to hold our attention on ourselves all day long? Maybe some very rare souls can, but for most of us, our minds are naturally going outwards. I mean, it's the very nature of the mind to go outwards. So trying to forcibly do something that we're not inclined to do can produce unwanted effects. So we need to accept our limitation. Why we are not attending to ourselves throughout the waking and dream states? Because we don't yet have sufficient love. So we need to try as much as possible to be self-attentive, and thereby slowly, slowly, this love, the requisite love will be cultivated. It cannot be forced.
So the inference is that it cannot be forced.
Yes,
That is
yes,
the,
yes.
That is the main thing there.
And also, we shouldn't think that we have understood Bhagavan's teaching perfectly because we've read one or two books. If we are following Bhagavan's path, and while following Bhagavan's path, we often read his teachings, read Nana, Uladunaptu, Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam, and so on. Our understanding of Bhagavan's teachings will naturally grow deeper and deeper. As time, when we first read Who Am I, Nana, we will understand something. But if we try to follow the path, what Bhagavan says there will become more and more meaningful to us. We'll understand more and more implication. At first, when we read it, we understand the meaning of the words. But the underlying implication of Bhagavan's words the implication reveals itself slowly as we follow this path. So to think that thinking that we don't have to read Bhagavan's teachings anymore, we just have to practice, is like if you have to visit a foreign country you've never been to before. You've been given a map. If you read the map and say, oh, now I've memorized the map, all I have to do is to go to that country. You're not going to remember, you haven't memorized the map perfectly. If you take the map with you, then you can often refer to it. And as you visit the places that are marked on the map will become more and more meaningful to you. Likewise with Bhagavan's teaching, as we go deeper in following his teachings, his teachings will become more and more meaningful to us. We'll understand more and more of the deep and subtle implication that lies behind the words.
So the other point is the importance of Shravana and Manana. We can understand here.
Yes, exactly.
We should neglect the studying of Bhagavan's teachings.
Yes. Some people, when they explain Shravana, Manana, Niti, Ityasana, they say first you have to study. You have to know what is said in the text. But when you know it, but you don't fully understand it, then you have to think about it until you understand it, and then you have to put it into practice, as if it's a 3-step process. But it's not. It's actually an iterative process. The more we go deep in the practice, the deeper our Sravana will become. The deeper our Sravana becomes, the deeper Manana becomes. The deeper Manana becomes, the deeper Nididhyasana will become. And the deeper Nididhyasana will become, the deeper the Sravana Manana will become.
So the background work has to go on alongside the
Exactly.
We can't just practice.
By often reading and thinking about Bhagavan's teachings, we get guidance and we get clarity on the path.
Thank you.
And also we get motivation to follow it more and more.
Yeah. Motivation is also, yeah. Thank you, sir.
All right.
The next question, I think the word is prarabdha here. If prarabdha does not exist when ego is annihilated, but is for our spiritual growth, can our ego grow spiritually?
Spiritual growth means we become more and more spiritually mature. That is, we are Vishaya vasanas, the seeds that give rise to desires, attachments, and so on, they grow weaker. And the Sat Vasana, the inclination to subside back into our being, becomes stronger. This is what is called developing spiritually. So, yes, so long as we rise as ego, there is relative degrees of progression on this path, but the progress is not that something is added to us. It's when more and more things drop down, when the to the extent to which the Vishaya vasanas are reduced in strength, the desires, attachments, likes, dislikes, and so on will drop off, and will automatically thereby cultivate bhakti and vairagya. This is the process. It's also described as purification of the mind, chitta suddhi. The chittam is the will. So when the Vishaya vasanas are weakened, that is the purification of the mind. The reason this purification is necessary, only when we are purified to a considerable extent, that is when the Vishaya vasanas are weakened to a sufficient extent, will we be willing to surrender ourselves. So the ego is progresses spiritually. The ego becomes cultivates bhakti and vairagya. Bhakti is the love to know ourselves, and vairagya is the freedom from desire to experience other things. In other words, the bhakti is the sattvasana, the vairagya is the weakening of the vishaya vasanas. These happen as we progress along the path, but the ultimate aim is the destruction of ego. Bhagavan, in verse 10 of Aruṇācala Padigam, when he's describing this process, he says, for the soul who's thought of Aruṇācala even once, Aruṇācala will subdue the cheshte, the outward going mental activity. He will pull them within to face itself, and thereby will make it motionless like itself, and then it will feed upon that ripened ego, that ripened soul. He will accept it as bali. That means accept it as a sacrificial offering. So we have to be sufficiently ripened before the ego can be annihilated. So ego is being ripened for its own annihilation. But when Bhagavan says there, that sweet soul, that implies that this purification of the mind, this is the ripening of the soul. So it becomes and God isn't going to eat unripe fruit. He eats only the ripe fruit. So we have to become ripe fruit in order to be consumed by him. In other words, we have to be willing to be consumed by him. So long as we're unripe, we're not yet willing to give ourselves wholly to him. And so he's not going to force himself on us. He's going to wait till we are wholeheartedly willing to give ourselves to him. But the process of ripening, that is happening by his grace. So he's waiting patiently, but he's doing what needs to be done. I hope that was a clear answer to that question.
The next question, Michael. Could Michael clarify the practice of self-attentiveness one more time, please?
The practice of self-attentiveness is extremely simple. We all know what it means to attend to something. But the difficulty people have in grasping what self-attentiveness means is that we ourselves are not an object. If we're told to attend to a mantra or a name of God or a form of God or some chakra in the body or something, we can visualize it and we can attend to it. But when we ask to attend to ourselves, we need to have a certain degree of subtlety of understanding to understand what it means, because it's not an object we're being asked to attend to, we're being asked to attend to ourselves. Ourself means ourself as the awareness that is aware of all objects. So in other words, we're attending not to any object, but to the subject. Though we are not an object, we know ourselves more clearly than we know any object, because objects appear and disappear, whereas we are that which is constantly present, the ever-present awareness in which phenomena, objects appear and disappear. So to understand this practice, we need to think a little bit carefully, a little bit deeply, and try to understand what Bhagavan means. Bhagavan has defined Atma-vichara as always keeping the mind on oneself. Keeping the mind on something means keeping our attention on it. So how do we keep our attention on ourself? What is this self we have to keep our attention on? It's obviously not the body, it's not the mind, it's not thoughts, it's not anything. It is just the awareness I am. That to which all other things appear and disappear. So we each have to think about it carefully and understand for ourselves. And the more we try to put it into practice, the more we try to apply what we've understood, the clearer it will become to us.
Next question, Michael. Did Bhagwan ever talk about the symbolism of the story in the Bible about biting the apple and hence gaining knowledge of good and evil in the story of Adam and Eve? Could that be likened to the dyad's principle in Advaita Vedanta?
Yes, if it's, I think, I'm not sure exactly how it's worded in the Bible, but if it said the knowledge of good and evil, yes, that's a pair of that is a dyad, a pair of opposites. As far as I'm aware, Bhagavan, well, we can't say Bhagavan has never spoken about something, because probably 99% of everything that Bhagavan ever said was never recorded. So in some context, someone may have asked him and he may have given some explanation and it may not have been recorded. But I would, in the light of his teachings, well, that is called the original sin. He did say something about the original sin he said the original sin is ego. In other words, the sinner is the original sin. Ego is the original sin because it's only when we rise as ego that all other good or bad actions are done by us. So no sin would be possible without ego. So, and in the Bible, I think they refer to that, they refer to it as the fall. The fall means we are falling from our natural state of infinite being into this state of finite existence, of identifying ourselves as I am this body. This we can say is the fall. That is the original sin. So Bhagavan didn't say anything about the apple per se, but he did say about original sin, but original sin is nothing but ego.
There's a question, it's addressed to everybody. I think it might be addressed to you, Michael. It's something. In deep sleep, there's absolute peace and also no objects and no world. Similarly, in full abidance in the self, is there no cognition of objects or the world, even though others see a sage like Bhagwan Ramana acting and interacting? Thank you.
Yes, Bhagavan was very, very clear about that. That is, the world appears only in the view of ego. So when ego is annihilated, who is there to see any world? But at the same time, Bhagavan has said, for example, in verse 18 of, in verse 17 of Ulladu, he says both for the jnani and the ajnani, the body is only I. This is, he said this deliberately because everyone knows his teaching is the body is not I. So why does he say there that for the jnani, both for the ajnani and the jnani, the body is only I? He clarifies what he means by saying, I'll get the actual verse. What he says in verse 17, for those who do not know themselves and for those who have known themselves, the body is actually I. For those who do not know themselves, I is only the extent of the body. In other words, I is limited to the body. For those who know themselves, who have known themselves within the body, oneself, I, shines without limit. That is, for the jnani, only I exists. So if at all there's a body, it cannot be anything other than I. So in that sense, he says that for the jnani, the body is actually I. And then in the next, and he ends by saying, consider that the difference between them is only this. Then in the next verse, he says, again, there he says, both for the jnani and the ajnani, the body is only I, or actually I. It's nothing other than I. Which may come as a surprise to people who know that Bhagavan's teaching is that the body is not I. The body is not, that is, we are not only this body. We are the infinite ground that has appeared as all this. So he continues the same idea in the next verse. Bhagavan teaches us that the world is unreal, but in this verse he says, the world is real for those who have known, who do not have knowledge, and those who have. In other words, for ajnanis and ajnanis, the world is real. For those who do not know, reality is to the extent of the world. In other words, just this world is real. For those who have known, reality pervades devoid of form as the Adhara. Adhara means the support, the basis, the underlying, the ground for the world. This is the difference between them, consider. So we can say it in this way. Bhagavan is seeing exactly what we are seeing. But whereas we see it as this world of multiplicity, Bhagavan sees it as himself alone. So what we see as many, he sees as one. This is like saying the snake is real, both for those who know it's a rope and for those who don't know it's a rope. That is, for those who don't know it's a rope, only the snake is real. Whereas for those who know it's a rope, they know, though it's not real as a snake, it is real as a rope. So for Bhagavan, there is nothing other than reality. We see the reality limited as the names and forms of this world, whereas Bhagavan sees the reality, he says it pervades devoid of form as the adhara, that means the underlying reality. Just like the rope is the adhara for the snake, it's that which appears as the snake. But even when the rope appears as a snake, it's always only a rope. It never actually becomes a snake. Likewise, the reality has never actually become the world. So for Bhagavan, the reality alone exists. And that reality is, of course, himself. Whereas we see the same reality as all this multiplicity. So what he sees as one, we see as many. What he sees as formless, we see as many forms. What he sees as infinite, we see as many finite things.
Michael, another question.
Yeah.
Just similar to the one on self-attentiveness. How to practice self-inquiry? I have asked so many people, but I didn't get a proper answer to this. Do we have to say something or just remain quiet while focusing on the right side of the heart?
We don't have to say anything. We don't have to do anything. We certainly don't have to focus on any object. The body is an object. The right side is an object. That is not what we should attend to. We should attend only to ourself. Ourself means our own being, to this fundamental awareness I am. That is what we should be attending to. In talks, there's a passage where someone asks a similar question. Someone asked Bhagavan, this is in which section? In section 273 in talks. Dr. Syed is asking questions. He asked, should I meditate on the right chest in order to meditate on the heart? And Bhagavan answers very clearly, the heart is not physical. Meditation should not be on the right or the left. Meditation should be on the self. Everyone knows I am. Who is the I? It will be neither within nor without, neither on the right nor on the left. I am, that is all. So in other words, the heart is just I am. We just have to meditate on I am. That doesn't mean meditate on the words I am, but what the words I am refer to. What the words I am refer to is our own being. That is what we need to meditate on. And as I said earlier, this may not be clear to everyone at first, but if we want to understand it, we have to think carefully. We have to pay close attention to what Bhagavan actually said and try to understand it and try to put it into practice. If we have even the vaguest idea of what Bhagavan is, vaguest understanding of what Bhagavan is talking about, if we try to put it into practice, then it will become clearer and clearer. In one place it's recorded both in Maharshi's Gospel and also in talks, I can't remember exactly where, when someone asked Bhagavan how to practice, Bhagavan says, if the way were objective, it could be shown objective, but this is not objective. Do you need to be shown the way inside your own home? That is, the words Bhagavan is given very, very clear. In Nana, he defines it as Sadakalamam Manate Atmavil Vaitirupadu. That means always keeping the mind on oneself. Keeping the mind on oneself means keeping our attention on ourselves. What it means to keep our attention on ourselves, we each have to understand. Ourself doesn't mean the body, it doesn't mean the mind, doesn't mean any object or any phenomena. It means only the awareness of our own being, I am. That is what we need to attend to.
There's a question from Raghu Michael. It's regarding where a particular verse is from, and the particular phrase is ripening of ego. So he's asking the line ripening of ego, which verse is this from?
If he's referring to what I was talking about earlier, I was talking about verse 10 of Aruṇācala Padigam. What I'll be talking about. I think our first meeting in August. Today I talked about 7, so in July I'll talk about 8 and 9 and verse 10. He doesn't actually say ripening of ego, he says that inuya, that sweet soul. That implies that spiritually ripened soul.
That seems to be the end of the questions.
Okay.
So should we end now then?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you very, very much, Michael. That
Okay,
was
well, thank you, everyone.
The sessions are becoming quite long, actually, and thank you for taking the time.
Okay.
It's not easy to talk and answer questions for 2.5 hours, 2.25 hours. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for attending and for these, I think, and for questions which lead to such insightful answers. Thank you. We'll close with Bhagwan's mantra. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Ramanaya.